developing a higher education curriculum in set teaching for health protection and promotion of intellectually disabled individuals. Sexual Health and Strategies, Part 1. This topic is learning material. It is intended for students of individual educational subjects based on the project. The video is divided into 4 parts that follow each other and complement each other. The videos reflect previously known and published scientific findings from various foreign authors and online platforms. In the introduction, generally valid starting points for the chosen topic can be presented. We can agree to define the key starting points from electronic sources for the purposes of introduction of the presentation. Sexuality is a key part of human nature. People with cognitive disability experience the same range of sexual thoughts, attitudes, feelings, desires, fantasies, and activities as anyone else. To understand and enjoy sexuality, everyone needs adequate information and support from a young age. Sexuality has psychological, biological, and social aspects, and is influenced by individual values and attitudes. A person's sexuality develops throughout childhood and adolescence and is a key part of their identity. The way each person understands and interprets their sexuality varies significantly and often changes over time. Healthy self-esteem and respect for self and others are important factors in developing positive sexuality. Most people with cognitive disability can have rewarding personal relationships. However, some may need additional support to develop relationships, explore and express their sexuality, and access sexual health information and services. The dimensions of sexuality. Sexuality is at the heart of our lives. It is expressed through its various dimensions. The following dimensions can be found in the document Program of Study Human Sexuality, 2015. The dimensions are the biological dimension, the psychological, affective, and relational dimension, the social-cultural dimension, the moral, spiritual, and religious dimension, and the ethical and legal dimension. Learning outcomes. These areas will be addressed in the video presentations. We will describe each theme later. They are sexuality, human nature, sexual health, and people with cognitive disability, sexuality education for people with cognitive disability, social opportunities, sexual relationships, and cognitive disability, forms of presentation of own sexuality and identity in culture. Chapter Sexuality, Human Nature. Good sexual health is important for our overall health and well-being. It includes the right to healthy relationships, access to inclusive and safe health services, reliable information, and freedom from coercion, violence, stigma, and discrimination. Young people with an intellectual disability experience the same range of sexual desires and sometimes activities as anyone else. Nowadays, they can have rewarding relationships like anyone else. The researchers mentioned on this slide describe in their work from 2022 a conceptual framework that draws on the theories and literature related to positive youth development, empowerment, human rights, gender, social, ecological, and life course perspectives. The framework highlights 6 key competencies for healthy adolescent sexuality development. 1. Sexual literacy. 2. Gender equal attitudes. 3. Respect for human rights and understanding consent. 4. Critical reflection skills. 5. Coping skills. And 6. Interpersonal skills. These authors subsequently define the issue as follows. These competencies have the potential to strengthen or impede adolescents' sense of sexual well-being in relation to both themselves, e.g., body image, self-efficacy, and others, e.g., mutually respectful relationships, whether adolescents are able to translate competencies into desires, actions, and achieve a sense of sexual well-being depends on the resources available to them, their agency, and on the influence of social ecological opportunities taxes. The framework can provide concrete direction for sexual and reproductive health practitioners and researchers by providing a platform for recognizing and operationalizing indicators of healthy sexuality development and serve as a theory of change for programs aiming to improve adolescent sexual and reproductive health and well-being. Our assess-based life course approach can also be used to make the case to donors and policymakers for why early investments and positive approaches to adolescent sexuality are needed to achieve sexual well-being over time. Historically, most research studies and programs have viewed adolescent sexuality as a problem behavior or sickness best prevented that is both immoral and socially unaccepted if outside of marriage, and brings both physical, e.g., HIV, unintended pregnancies, and psychological consequences, e.g., emotional trauma, depressive symptoms, academic problems. Indeed, Dorman and McClelland found that 80% of studies on adolescent sexuality in the first decade of the 21st century focused on the prevention of negative outcomes. While the latter is not strange from a public health perspective, certainly it is a lot easier to justify studying a sensitive topic because of its potential risks, as opposed to focusing on positive aspects, which might be both taboo and difficult to measure. An exclusive risk focus is problematic in a number of ways. First, it assumes that adolescent sexuality and related behaviors are a priori problematic, while in fact they are a part of normative developmental process. From a life course perspective, sexuality development begins at, or even before, birth, and includes various behavioral, relational, and normative transitions throughout the life course, with adolescence being one such key transition. During puberty, sexual development is accelerated by a growth of genitals and hormonal changes, manifesting both physically and emotionally. With growing moral and cognitive development, adolescents increasingly develop abstract reasoning and problem-solving skills, and reflect on their own personal qualities, as well as their place in the world, and how they fit in relation to others. Young people gradually develop their sexual orientation and start to form romantic and sexual relationships and to experiment with different practices. Today, sexual initiation during adolescence, within or outside of marriage, is normative in most cultural settings, and the emergence of new contraceptive methods and abortion has further separated sex from pregnancy and childbearing. Second, risk and danger-oriented interventions, including abstinence-only programs, have been shown to not be effective in preventing sexual risk, and to clash with adolescents' needs, realities, and human rights to explore their sexuality, and to seek and receive SRHR information and services. And finally, because sexual activity is almost always conceptualized in terms of penile vaginal intercourse, and rarely in terms of relationships, pleasure, feelings, and other sexual practices, programs tend to focus on older, heterosexual youth, thereby overlooking what is needed to promote healthy sexuality development among a diversity of adolescents, including sexual minorities and younger age groups. A growing chorus of voices from scholars and stakeholders are therefore calling for positive or healthy approaches to adolescent SRHR. Such a perspective does not mean that all young people are, or should be, having sex, or that all intimate relations are healthy. It merely implies that adolescent sexuality involves more than just avoiding risks and unwanted consequences. For example, for some young people, sexual abstinence may be the healthiest potential choice at one point in time, and for some it may involve other ways of exploring sexuality than intercourse per se. As such, empowering young people with different skills, e.g. social, emotional, cognitive, that allow them to navigate information and relationships is an essential part of development for all adolescents, irrespective of whether or not they are sexually active. This presentation shows a model of 4 pillars of comprehensive public health, focused inquiry and intervention in relation to sexuality. Please take a minute to analyze the individual relationships according to the presented starting points. Please pay attention to the 4 pillars. Now let's move on to the next slide. Sexuality, human nature. Sexuality and sexual identity. A. Bisexuality. Bisexuality is when a person finds men and women physically, sexually, or emotionally attractive. B. Gay male sexuality. There is no real explanation as to why some men are gay and others are not. It is just a part of the wide variety of human sexuality. C. Lesbian sexuality. Many women report they have lesbian experiences or feelings, but do not think of themselves as lesbians. D. Men and sexuality. Men experience a radical change in sexuality during puberty when their bodies undergo big physical changes. E. Sexuality explained. Switchboard Victoria. Sexuality is not about whom we have sex with or how often we have it. Sexuality is about our feelings, thoughts, attractions, behaviors towards other people. We can find other people physically, sexually, or emotionally attractive, and all those things are a part of our sexuality. Switchboard Victoria Inc. is a community-based not-profit organization that provides a peer-based, volunteer-driven support for a service for LGBTIQ+ people and their friends, families, and allies. E. Trans and gender diverse people. Your gender is what feels natural to you, even if it's different from your biological sex. Some people may not feel comfortable with their biological sex, but choose to live with the gender which they were born. F. Women, sex and sexuality. Most girls start puberty at around 10 years old, but it can be earlier or later than that. Your body will go through big changes as you change from a girl to a young woman. Some girls and women, gender isn't straightforward. If this is you, help is available if you need it. Please take a minute to analyze this mind map from the following sentences and define the strength of individual relationships. Let's go on to the next slide. Sexual health and people with cognitive disability. The problem is connected with the specifics of the personality, especially in the area of emotions, attitudes, and values, which influence the experience of a person with ID. Current scientific texts describe the following. WHO, 2022, defines the discussed issue as follows. A mental disorder is characterized by a clinically significant disturbance in an individual's cognition, emotional regulation, or behavior. It is usually associated with distress or impairment in important areas of functioning. There are many different types of mental disorders. Mental disorders may also be referred to as mental health conditions. The latter is a broader term covering mental disorders, psychological disabilities, and other mental states associated with significant distress, impairment in functioning, or risk of self-harm. This fact sheet focuses on mental disorders as described by the International Classification of Diseases, 11th revision, ICD-11. In 2019, 280 million people were living with depression, including 23 million children and adolescents. Depression is different from usual mood fluctuations and short-lived emotional responses to challenges in everyday life. During a depressive episode, the person experiences depressed mood, feeling sad, irritable, empty, or a loss of pleasure or interest in activities for most of the day, nearly every day, for at least 2 weeks. Several other symptoms are also present, which may include poor concentration, feelings of excessive guilt or low self-worth, hopelessness about the future, thoughts about dying or suicide, disrupted sleep, changes in appetite or weight, and feeling especially tired or low in energy. People with depression are at increased risk of suicide. Yet effective psychological treatment exists, and depending on the age and severity, medication may also be considered. Sexual health is fundamental to the overall health and well-being of individuals, couples, and families, and to the social and economic development of communities and countries, by WHO 2022. Sexual health, when viewed affirmatively, requires a positive and respectful approach to sexuality and sexual relationships, as well as the possibility of having pleasurable and safe sexual experiences, free of coercion, discrimination, and violence. The ability of men and women to achieve sexual health and well-being depends on their access to comprehensive, good quality information about sex and sexuality, knowledge about the risks they may face and their vulnerability to adverse consequences of unprotected sexual activity, ability to access sexual health care, living in an environment that affirms and promotes sexual health. Expressed emotion, EE. The next text of the presentation continues with another important problem. Richard P. Hastings, Tracy Lloyd, 2007, published a treatise on the topics expressed emotion, EE. Expressed emotion is a measure of the affective relationship between two people, characterized by criticism, hostility, and emotionally over-involved attitudes. Outside of the field of intellectual disabilities, there has been considerable interest in EE as an environmental marker that explains variance in the severity and/or course of a number of psychiatric disorders. Researchers have also studied EE in parents and found strong associations with children's behavior problems. In this review, we focus on the data from 11 published studies of EE in families of children and adults with intellectual disabilities. We conclude that there is evidence for the presence of high EE in some families, and that this alone should consult researchers and clinicians and set an agenda for considerable future research effort. We also note a lack of attention to the measurement of EE in intellectual disability. In terms of the existence evidence base, we suggest that there is support for the hypothesis that behavior problems in children and adults with intellectual disabilities may be related to high EE in parents, and a small amount of data preceding over time support the putative causal effect of high EE on maintaining or exacerbating behavior problems. Given that EE is perhaps best conceptualized as the result of an interaction between caregivers and those cared for, there is a need to explore interventions that may help to remediate high EE within families. This is also important to understand from this position that EE may be a normative part of the experience of caring for someone under very stressful circumstances and not something for which families are blamed. Other future research priorities and some implications for practice are also discussed. The association between familiarity with mental disorder and the desire for social distance is to a considerable extent mediated through emotions. The public's emotional reactions to people with mental disorder are relatively under-researched. This research was devoted to the current issue of emotions of people with mental disabilities in mainstream society by authors Anita Holzinger and Herbert Matzinger, 2010. In this text, he writes the following: based on findings from population surveys, we provide an overview of the public's emotional reactions to people with mental illness. A literature search for population studies using measures of emotional response to people with mental illness was carried out. In addition, data on the public's emotional reactions originating from representative surveys conducted in Germany in the years 1990, 1993, and 2001 were analyzed. Positive emotional reactions to people with mental illnesses are most prevalent, followed by fear and anger. This pattern appears relatively stable across different cultures. In recent years, the emotional response of the public remained unchanged or even deteriorated. The public seems to react quite differently to people with different mental disorders. Emotional reactions have a substantial effect on the desire for social distance. The association between familiarity with mental disorder and the desire for social distance is to a considerable extent mediated through emotions. The public's emotional reaction to people with mental disorder are relatively under-researched. More research may help better understand the complexities of the stigma surrounding mental illness. Interventions aimed at reducing the stigma of mental illness may benefit from paying more attention to emotions. Please take a moment to analyze this mind map from the following sentences and define the strengths of individual relationships. Thank you. Now let's move on to the next slide. Here you can find the list of resources used to create this document. On the website Association of Maternal and Child Health Programs from US, with address in Washington, you can find the following information related to the rights and availability of care and support for people with disabilities and their real use abroad. It is an inspiring practice. Sexual and reproductive health are important parts of overall health. However, people with disabilities are not always given the resources they need to achieve it. For many, this topic is addressed in schools, at home, in doctors' offices, or in the care of other human service professionals. The authors on the website ask the following question: are people with disabilities asked about their sexual needs, or does society assume that they cannot or do not have sex? The following conceptual construct, with statistical dates, is presented on the website. People with disabilities require information and tools on sexual and reproductive health in order to make healthy choices and prevent illnesses so they too can lead full lives. According to the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 22% of adults in the United States have some type of disability, and disabilities are especially common among women and minorities. CDC data also shows that in 2015, an alarming 41% of high school students reported having had sexual intercourse, many without the use of a condom. Half of the nearly 20 million new STDs reported each year were among those between the ages of 15 to 24. And young people between the ages of 13 and 24 accounted for an estimated 22% of all new HIV diagnoses. People with disabilities are not exempt from these implications. There is great need to address the lack of inclusive services and resulting health implications for people with disabilities, especially those who are also members of other undeserved populations. If a person with a disability is not treated as a whole person, rather than just focusing on their disability, the lack of information on sexual and reproductive health leaves them vulnerable and at a greater risk for preventable health problems. People with disabilities should and do have a right to be treated with dignity and to be provided sexual and reproductive health resources in a format or manner that works for the individual. Most barriers that prevent people with disabilities from being included in conversations and health promotions efforts around the sexual and reproductive health can be addressed by providing sign language interpreters for people who are deaf, providing alternate formats for written materials, using simple language and ideas that are easy to grasp for those with learning and cognitive disabilities, and providing accommodations to those with physical limitations. The point is, they should simply not be ignored. The Association of University Centers on Disabilities Sexual Health Special Interest Group SIG connects individuals interested in this topic and provides resources about disability and sexuality. The purpose of the Sexual Health SIG is to identify, organize, stimulate, educate, and mobilize individuals and organizations to increase the capacity and commitment within the nation to meet the sexual health needs of all people with disabilities. The resource page, reference on the Sexual Health SIG page, is managed by the Wyoming Institute for Disabilities Sexual and Reproductive Health Projects. These resources cover a wide range of topics including dating, healthy relationships, and sexual health. Join the conversation, share your knowledge, and make an impact on the lives of people with disabilities. The final topic of our video measures to the topic the idealized male body, the effect of media images on men and boys. It is sure important for people with ID. This topic is described in the document CTR Body Image and Males on the website The Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada 2013. The document contains the following information. A significant proportion of images in the media involve some element of sexuality and present idealized body images for both males and females. Research on the sexualization of young women in the media has highlighted the effects that such messages have on the mental health and physical health of women and girls. Boys and young men are also influenced by the sexualized images and messages conveyed by various media sources. Studies are beginning to explore the particular challenges that young men face when presented with daily media messages about the ideal male body and appearance.